So Donald Trump has basically fired the Supreme Court. They're out of a job now. They're out of a job. Donald Trump has basically fired them because yesterday he signed an executive order that would bring independent agencies under the control of the White House. Now, the reason as to why the Supreme Court is basically fired now, the reason why they're basically out of a job now, is because Donald Trump's executive order claims that no employee of the executive branch acting in their official capacity may advance an interpretation of the law as the position of the United States that contravenes the president or the attorney general's opinion on a matter of law. Now, for those of us who understand how government functions, I mean, we're not conservatives here, so we understand how this works. The judicial branch is in charge of interpreting the legality of actions taken by the other branches of government. Donald Trump has basically, in his executive order, winked at the Supreme Court saying, "You're out of a job." This is what Donald Trump specifically tried to do. President Donald Trump on Tuesday signed a sweeping executive order bringing independent agencies under the control of the White House in an action that would greatly expand his power, but is likely to attract significant legal challenges. It represents Trump's latest attempt to consolidate power beyond boundaries other presidents have observed and to test the so-called unitary executive theory, which states that the president has the sole authority over the executive branch, and it reflects the influence of Russ Vought, Trump's budget chief, one of several conservatives in his orbit who have called for axing independent arms of the executive branch. Now, which independent agencies is Trump trying to axe and have complete control over? The theory was long considered fringe, and many mainstream legal scholars still believe it is illegal, given that Congress set the agencies up specifically to act independently or semi-independently from the president. These include the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, all of which enact regulations and can impose hefty fines on businesses that violate the rules. Now, I'm sure it's a complete coincidence that the Republican Party and the orange blob that rules over them have decided to have complete control over agencies that oversee the shifty, untrustworthy, and basically scammer activity of corporations and businesses in this country. It's also no surprise that Elon Musk got rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because the Republican Party has always been a party of empowering and emboldening the rich and disempowering and stamping out the poor. It's been this way since Reagan, maybe even beyond Reagan. They've been at this for quite some time. It's not a coincidence that they're doing this, and they have successfully brainwashed everyday conservatives into believing that government is bad, corporations are good. At least American citizens are represented in government. At least their elected representatives in Congress actually pass legislation. But now Trump is saying, I am the law. If Congress makes a law, I break it. And I also interpret whether or not my actions were in breach of the law. So basically what Trump is saying is, I am all three branches in one. This man thinks he's the Trinity. He actually believes he is above and beyond any sort of accountability. And the Republican Party gave him this power. The Supreme Court can't complain now. They can't complain now because the reality is they asked for this. The Supreme Court gave Donald Trump the powers of a king. Now, the Republican Party's excuse for this nonsense is the people's president should be directly over these agencies. The reason why politically elected officials don't have complete control over these agencies is because they're meant to do their job without pressure from ideologies, without pressure from political parties. It's meant to be an apolitical job. Jobs in government are meant to be apolitical, like 99% of them. All of these bureaucracies that cover education and health and all of these things, they're not meant to be run by people with ideologies. But the Republican Party wants these agencies to be run by ideologically bound and propelled people in order to destroy these agencies. Now, here was Donald Trump's declaration of basically being king. No employee of the executive branch acting in their official capacity may advance an interpretation of the law as the position of the United States that contradicts the president or the attorney general's opinion on a matter of law. I know it says contravenes, but they use words like this on purpose to tire you out, to make you not want to read it, to make it really difficult for you to understand. What they mean is no employee of the executive branch, which Trump presides over, can present any interpretation of American law that contradicts Trump and his attorney general's interpretation. So let's just say you brought an interpretation of the law from, I don't know, maybe the Supreme Court. Let's say you brought an interpretation of the law from the Supreme Court. Donald Trump and his attorney general, Pam Bondi, can just say no. 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 And what are you going to do? Ain't nothing you can do. You could cry, you could complain, but there's literally nothing you can do. The Supreme Court can't do anything. I'll tell you why. Because although Supreme is in their name, it doesn't mean anything. The Supreme Court does not have the Department of Defense. The Supreme Court does not have the Department of Justice, meaning they can't enforce the law. They can't use violence to enforce the law. All they can do is just make rulings and hope Trump decides to follow those rulings. That's all they can do. Their job is pretend now. That's what I mean when I say Trump fired the Supreme Court, because Donald Trump was given the power to utilize the powers of the presidency in any which way he so chooses to, and it's considered an official act. It's an official act, meaning he could arrest the Supreme Court because he's doing it through his DOJ. That makes it an official act. If he has the Supreme Court deleted from this earth by use of, I don't know, the Green Berets or SEAL Team 6 or whatever, Delta Force, the Rangers, whoever he decides to summon up to do his dirty work, it's an official act. The Supreme Court cannot actually enforce any ruling they make because Donald Trump possesses the power to enforce the law. When this is all said and done, I don't think we will have a president anymore. I don't think the president as a position in this country is going to survive Trump. Either the president's going to be a position significantly stripped of power, or it just won't even exist when this is all said and done. Trump is about to ruin the position of president for literally every future American to come. So effectively, yeah, Trump has fired the Supreme Court. Their job in the judicial branch is to interpret the legality of actions taken by other branches of government. But Trump is saying, I determine the legality of my actions and your actions and everyone else's actions, not the Supreme Court. And Trump has the power to enforce the law. I want you all to keep in mind, politics is really a game of pretend in a way, right? We create laws, we create roads, we create all of these different things that are sometimes tangible, sometimes intangible. These rules are all intangible. They're written on paper, but they only exist if we all follow them. And the following of those rules is backed up by the enforcement, by the police, right? By the Department of Justice, right? These enforcement mechanisms push us toward following the law, but all laws are they're just pieces of paper. If tomorrow all of America decides the purge is legal, the purge is legal. Laws only exist so much as people follow them. If Trump decides I'm not going to follow the law, it doesn't matter what the law says. Trump has the enforcement mechanisms to make the Supreme Court shut up. Literally. And they're not going to give up power. The Supreme Court would rather be pretend justices and be real justices. That's the unfortunate reality of what we're dealing with. So Donald Trump has basically fired the Supreme Court. It'll be very interesting to see how this goes down because the Supreme Court's not going to just surrender their power. You know, at least not without some kind of vocalization of their concerns. Peter Thiel, stooge Vance wants to be president in 2028. Elon Musk is still plotting God knows what. This will, before we as a country confront Trump, these people will end up confronting one another. There will be a lot of infighting to come. That you can believe. So it is what it is. Trump has basically fired the Supreme Court.